This is His Story Podcast. Today we have on Christopher Beth, the chief storyteller for the Bucket Ministry. Chris, thank you for being with us today.
Todd, thank you so much. This is such a blessing.
Well, let me tell you something. On this podcast, I normally interview people that I work with because I know their stories very well. And I've either heard them before, I ask in different ways. You were probably one of the first people I've had on this podcast where I don't know you. And I'm really looking forward to this. And you're probably scratching your head like, how did we even get together today?
Yeah, and I can't wait to hear that story myself.
So I have a client who is actually a friend. I guess all my clients are friends at this point, but we're really buddies. We work together quite a bit, and sometimes, on the record, sometimes off the record. And I have a TikTok and Instagram page where I highlight ministries in little 1-minute clips.
Yeah.
And I was telling him what I was doing, and he says, "Oh, I keep a record of some amazing ministries that I've run into over the years. And I have an Evernote file with all these amazing ministries. And I'd love to share them with you." And I said, "Man, I'll take it." Well, I clicked and I saw the Bucket Ministry. I thought, what is the Bucket Ministry? What is that?
Wow.
And I got down about an hour rabbit hole where I went to your website and I was fascinated with what you got. And I couldn't believe that I had never heard of you before. It blew my mind with what you were doing. And I made a video about you guys without knowing you. And then it turns out we both have a common friend that works with me on a project and works with you guys. And so I just lucked, quote unquote, God's sovereignty lucked upon you. And I think you guys are doing not only amazing things, you're doing it amazingly well. And I thought, wow, I ran into somebody that doesn't need my help. And it just sort of intrigued me.
Well, that is so awesome. And so the common friend you're talking about is Brother Jason. And just for the sheer fact that some other ministries and work with some other ministries that he does, that's where I thought the connection came from. But this other story of just receiving a file with some interesting ministries is
it's even better. Yeah. I don't think you probably know that his name is Rome Van Dyke. He's a Bible teacher and from Canada. And he went to DTS. I'm not sure how he found out about you. I'm not asking, but if it wasn't for him, I would have never known. And then I went to your website and just started watching your videos. And well, for those listening, let's hold off because the Bucket Ministry already has the coolest name ever. That it already sort of begs people asking, what is that? But I want to know about you first. So tell me a little bit about you. Where did you grow up? When did you become a Christian? Like, just give me your background just so I can know who you are.
Well, the easy story is I have no background in ministry. I spent 35 years as a business consultant, and basically, long story short, I help people make money. And honestly, I thought that I would be doing that most of my life. I'd retire and follow the traditional path of retirement and maybe fish a lot. I had no idea that at the age of 54, and that's how old I am now, I would be leading a global ministry. I'd be a pastor, and that I would be fishing for men. Wow. So grew up outside Chicago, in one of the northwest suburbs outside Chicago, and then got out of there as quickly as possible. So at the point of college, moved to Kansas, and my wife and I went to Kansas University, and have been living in Dallas, Texas for the last 21, 22 years.
Wow. And you studied finance? I mean, if you help people make money, what was your background in college?
Yeah, this is where the story gets a little weirder. No, I am a fine art major, and have always wanted to teach art and to paint and draw and have my own studio. And maybe someday the Lord allows me to do that. But right now, He's got me advancing His kingdom through clean, safe drinking water.
Wow.
So,
It's interesting. I remember being a senior, or no, I wasn't a senior. I was probably a junior in college. I had not declared a major yet. Didn't know what I wanted to be still at 20 years old. And one of my teachers talked me into getting a liberal arts degree. And they gave me the stat that most liberal arts majors make less money coming out of college than somebody like in business or whatever. But after 10 or 15 years, they make more because they're well adapted and well-rounded people and they have a liberal education. I don't know if it's true, but I bought it and I did the same thing. I think it did prepare me for life. So how did you get from art into being a business consultant?
well, that's a long story too. I have known my wife, and we've dated since high school, and we've been together a long, long time. We met in Illinois. We went to college together, and now we're in Texas together. So she went to nursing school at Kansas University, and at a certain point, we found the need for one of us to get a job, and I had to get a regular job and continue with the school a little bit longer after that. And it was basically to support us. And just by I don't know if that was originally God's plan or not. I can only assume so at this point, but by whatever happenstance at that point, I just continued working, and she finished nursing school, and I stayed in the business world. And by a series of fairly large doors opening to me, I was able to start learning the trade of business and being a business consultant, how to read financial statements, how to assist people with their business and connect the financial aspect of the business to their operations.
Okay.
And so how I generally worked is I would go into a business and watch how they work, and then spend a few days at that, and then spend a few days with them analyzing their financials and find opportunities for improvement. And with no background, no education in that other than working in the industry that I was consulting in.
Wow. And then you became good at what you do and people found out about you and it just snowballed from there.
Listen, Todd, after 30 years of doing something, just about anybody should get good at it. If you have that much practice, just on muscle memory alone, you get pretty good.
That's a great point. Okay, well, did you grow up in a church? Like, when did that conversion happen?
Well, that's another interesting story. Well, I was made to go to church when I was younger, like a lot of us were at certain points, and went to a congregational church in Illinois, and had a great pastor there who is still a very special person to me in my memory. But I never got close to the Lord. I never really accepted what I was being taught at that point. I never got close to Jesus in this process. And so I went from that point of being a young man and attending church to really not being engaged, being involved with the church for the next 20, 25 years. And we ended up moving to Texas and started to have a family. And we had 2 children, and they played club soccer. And we were coming home one day from soccer practice, driving home like we always did. My daughter was in the back seat. I was driving. My son was home with my wife, and my daughter and I got in a horrific car crash in Rowlett, Texas, hit head on in an intersection, spun the car around, and I was trapped in the car. My 12-year-old daughter at that point got out of the car and had to drag me out of the car because I couldn't get out. And later she collapsed, and we found out that she had broken her back in the car accident.
Mm.
Seatbelt is actually what broke her back. So we're at an emergency room, and I remember that it was so busy that they didn't have a room for her, that she was in the hallway. She was strapped to this board, and she was just sobbing in pain. And here I am. My wife isn't there yet. I'm alone with my daughter. They're putting all kinds of tubes in her and doing this just crazy stuff in a hallway. And I'm overwhelmed beyond belief. And I remember at that point in that hallway, kneeling down and inviting Jesus into my heart at that point, because I knew I couldn't do this alone.
Wow.
And so I received Christ about 12 years ago, and it's been fast forward ever since.
Wow. Did out of curiosity, during all the time of recovery and dealing with all that, I mean, were you just in the deep end of back into the word, finding a local church? Like, did you just dive in, or did you sort of wade into that new relationship you had with Christ?
Man, that's such a good question. And I think that's why I'm going as fast as I am right now, is at that point, we were attending a church, but again, I had no relationship with that church. And so I received Christ into my heart. And honestly, it was not anything that I talked about, not anything that I broadcasted. And so what I found is my faith progression, my closeness to Christ, did not come as if I was being discipled. And I now know that discipleship is the key to this faith journey, right? And so that didn't happen for me for quite some time. So I started reading the word more, and I invested in that and tried to self-educate my people. But as soon as I started to get into a community of other believers and I started to be discipled, is when everything started happening so much faster. And
Right.
part of this is right at the start of the bucket ministry, and really surrounding myself with like-minded people is really what has advanced my own faith journey right now.
Well, that totally makes sense. Boy, I could fill up 10 minutes right here. Talk. If we were having dinner, I would fill in and echo some things you said, but I'm going to move on. Okay, so you're successful at your work. You are a late bloomer Christian. I think that's a way to say that.
Fair.
You're thinking about retiring, raising a family. You're in east side of the Dallas Metroplex in Texas. How in the world did the bucket ministry even start? What planted the seed? What happened to get that rolling?
Yeah, that's amazing when you frame it that way, because I tell this story an awful lot, and all those things are correct. Successful in the business world, great family, late bloomer as a believer and as a follower of Christ. So in 2012, my daughter came home from school, and she went to school at a Christian school here in Rockwall called Heritage Christian. And she decided that she wanted to go on a mission trip to the Amazon basin in Brazil.
Wow.
My wife and I, we looked at each other and we're like, what?
Yeah.
Because she'd been to South Texas on a mission, but
not South America.
Yeah, and so we look at each other and we quickly decide that one of us is going to have to go with her. And it was mutually decided at that point that I would go with her. But the important thing here, Todd, to understand is I didn't go because I had a love or compassion for the Brazilian people. I didn't go because I thought I would be part of this mission, right? And I had no aspiration to be part of a mission organization to do mission work, to be part of a church, any of that, right? Because I'm still early on in my walk with Christ. And so I was going as a dad just to make sure she came home.
Right.
And I had just no other plan other than that.
Yep.
So
expensive chaperoning. That's all you were looking for.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it was. So in 2012, my daughter Savannah and I, we board a plane, fly to Manaus, Brazil. And I remember getting off the plane onto the tarmac. There was no jet bridge there. And we got off and we're just hit with this oppressive humidity. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what have we done? We take this short bus ride to the Amazon River from the airport in Manaus, Brazil. And we board this boat and it's like 11:30, 12 p.m. at night. And we're hanging hammocks up on this boat to go on this river boat that's going to take us 18 hours into the Amazon basin. And I remember hanging these hammocks up. I mean, everything's drippy and wet because this is the rainforest and it's just 1,000,000,000% humidity. So we're hanging our hammocks up. Savannah and I are sleeping side by side in hammocks in an open air riverboat. And she comes over to me as we're hanging our hammocks and she goes, Dad, I think we made a mistake.
You're a little late now, honey. Should have read the brochure.
A little late now, and it's just miserable, right?
Yeah.
And I was so far out of my comfort zone, not only for the climate, not only for the sleeping conditions, but I was out of my comfort zone because there's a whole boat full of people that are talking about Jesus. And I had not been around that many people in that kind of fellowship that were that vocal about serving Jesus and being the hands and the feet for his mission. And so it was uncomfortable, Todd. And so that night we drove 18 hours into the Amazon basin straight through the night. Most uncomfortable night of my life. I just, the only way I was able to sleep is just in pure sweat. So we get to where we're going, and we had multiple ministries on this riverboat, and the organization was a great organization we went with. It was called Amazon Outreach, and they send short-term missionary teams into the Amazon basin. And so there's multiple ministries on this boat: men's ministry, women's ministry, VBS, doctor, dentist, and then this ministry they called the faith team. So the trip leader, dear friend of mine, her name is Phyllis. Phyllis assigns me to go on the faith team. I thought, why can't I do soccer camp?
Right.
Why can't I just
I'll watch the boat. I'll ring these hammocks out.
Yeah, I'll do laundry. You want me to go on a faith team? So what this faith team was, is they went door to door, introducing what the team is going to be doing in the village that day. And then at that point, we prayed over people. And so essentially it was door-to-door evangelism is what it was. And so the first day I go out and I'm doing this and we're going door to door. And I'm telling you, Todd, this is the most uncomfortable thing in my life because there's all these people praying over people, and I'd never been in this environment before. So if they're praying over here, I'm way over here and I'm praying. I'm at the other side of the house. I'm praying, but I'm praying nobody talks to me or makes me pray over something.
You're praying a whole different prayer. And by the way, just out of curiosity, does all of Brazil speak Portuguese and y'all have translators? So this is even double complicated?
Yeah, in almost all of Brazil, it's Portuguese. And so it's super complicated. Yeah. And but of all the languages, Portuguese is one of those that is actually very pleasant to listen to and almost as romantic and hypnotic in a way. But so we're doing this. And then on the second day of this trip, she wants me to go on this faith team again. And I'm like, oh, man, I got a petition to get off this thing. And on the third day, she assigns me to it again. And I remember thinking, this is the worst trip of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so uncomfortable right now. So I go out to get in this boat to go across the river. And I've been going out with a pastor for the previous 2 days. His name was Pastor Ricky. And we go to get in this boat to go across the river to see this little home across the river from where we were parked in the big boat. And Pastor Ricky sits down in the boat. And at that point, he gets up and he starts to walk away. And I'm like, hey, where are you going? Did you forget something? And he goes, no, you got this. And I'm like, what? What do you mean I got this? I have no idea what you're even talking about. And he said, no, you handle it today. And I remember this sense of panic came over me, Todd. And I said, please don't leave me. And he still left.
Wow.
So here we are going across the river now. I'm without the pastor I went with, and it's just me, a couple other people, and an interpreter. And I'm thinking, I can't do this. And I had that nervous sweat, right? And
yeah, what part's humidity and what part's nervousness?
Absolutely. So I got this nervous sweat percolating, and it's more or less a situation of, I don't know if I'm going to throw up or something else is going to happen, but it's not going to be good. So then I get this calmness as we're approaching the house, and I'm like, hey, listen, all I'm going to do is repeat what this guy did previously. And I'm just going to be a parrot. I'm just going to mimic what he did. I can get through this one.
Go through the motions. Yeah.
Yeah. So we walk up to this house, and there's this little tiny plank that we walk across, and we're greeted by this wonderful Brazilian couple. And I would say at that point, they're late 50s, early 60s. And they invite us into their home so warmly. And this little Brazilian woman looks at me and she goes, are you thirsty? And I'm like, yeah, I'm thirsty.
I've been sweating this whole boat trip.
I'm drenched in sweat, right? And so she asked me if I'm thirsty, and I'm like, yeah. So I'm not going to lie. I half expected her to go into a refrigerator that didn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, she's living on the side of a river in the Amazon basin. What was I thinking? And I half expected her to get me a bottle of water that didn't exist, because honestly, at this point, I'm a privileged American living in Rockwall County, Texas. If I want a drink of water, I can go to the store and just buy a bottle of water. What do I know about a world water crisis, right? Yeah. And so I'm expecting her to go in a refrigerator, but what she does in return is she walks through her kitchen. She walks outside onto that little plank that I walk across to get to her house, and she takes 2 cups. They're mismatched and they're cracked. And she bends down in the river and she dips these 2 cups of water out of the river. And I'm like, what is she doing?
Yeah, you're thinking, if we're going to boil these things, I'm going to be here a couple hours.
And I'm thinking, nah, this can't be. And sure enough, she walks back. She hands 1 cup to me, 1 cup to my interpreter, and she's expecting us to drink this. So now, for the first time in my life, I'm starting to realize this is all these people have to drink. This is it. So I would say previously, before this, I have never been in the business of hearing the Lord's voice. Or maybe I should say I never listened, because those two are probably 2 different things. And so as I'm sitting here holding this glass of dirty water, I'm pondering, what should I do now? Because if I drink this, I'm going to spend the rest of the trip in the bathroom. If I don't, she's going to think I'm rude. So I look over at my interpreter. His name's Nelson, and he's wagging his finger no. So at this point, I realize I can't drink it. But the next thing that happened probably changed my life at such a wholesale level that I would say I don't recognize myself in the mirror anymore. And I heard 2 words that day. And those 2 words that I heard were help them. Now, as I said, prior to this, I had never heard the Lord's voice. I had never listened. I had never received direction. But here was 2 words that clearly I know somebody else did not say that was in the room, but they came with no instruction, Todd. I didn't know what help them meant. Was I supposed to cook him dinner? Was I supposed to open up my wallet and give him $20? I mean, what does help them mean?
Mhm.
So I left there that day with this burden on my heart and got home and started telling people about what happened to me that day, started trying to unpack what help them meant. And one day I was talking to the trip doctor that came on that trip with us. And I said, "Hey, Dr. Casey, can you tell me of all the people that you treated, how many were treated for some sort of condition from drinking dirty water?" And he goes, "Oh, that's easy." And I thought, he's going to say 3. And he
Mhm.
said, "All of them."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What do you mean all of them?" And he goes, "Chris, they're drinking out of the river.
Yeah.
They're drinking parasites. They're drinking fecal matter. They're drinking all these things because that's their only source." And he said, all the people we treated presented symptoms of waterborne disease, headaches, nausea, skin rashes, diarrhea, all these conditions. And I said, "So you're telling me that this is a thing?" Because again, what do I know about a world water crisis?
Right.
And he's like, "Yeah." So at this point, I start thinking that help them meant that I'm supposed to give these people clean water, and no idea about the spiritual aspect of this. I thought
Mhm.
this was just a humanitarian mission. So I started researching water wells, biosand filters, everything I could find. I tried to make myself an expert on water filtration and clean water. And I thought, well, wells seem like the right option, except in the Amazon basin, the water rises and falls 30,
Mhm.
40 feet throughout the year. So if it rises that much, it's going to flood most of the wells. And if the well floods, it's contaminated.
Mhm.
And it's a complicated process to clean it. So I thought there's got to be another option. So at this point, I go and I'm researching water filters, but I go with my family up to REI, that camping store that's in Dallas.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the water filters. The kids are looking at new shoes or whatever. And I come across a water filter by a company called Sawyer. And it's in this bag and it says it attaches to a bucket and it makes so much water. And I got intrigued by this thing. So I bought 2 of them. And I remember what my wife said, that she's like, "Do you really need 2?" And I
Huh.
said, "Honey, I got to figure out what this whole help them thing means."
Mm.
And so I bought 2 of these Sawyer water filters and brought them home, started reading up on them, hooked them up to a bucket, played with it, seemed like it was going to be really good. So then I convinced my family. I said, "Hey, I want to run an experiment because this thing is supposed to remove all bacteria, all parasites, everything from dirty lake water or river water that makes us sick. So we're going to drink out of this for a week."
Wow. And test it. We, not me, we.
Yeah. So my family, who's very adventurous, my wife and the 2 kids, they agree that they're going to drink the water. So by the end of the week, we couldn't tell the difference if the water was cold that came through the filter or a bottle of Rosarca or any kind of bottled water. We couldn't
Wow.
tell the difference. And none of us got sick. I thought, okay, experiment pass.
Okay.
So I think at this point, this may be a tool because this filter attaches to any bucket or receptacle and it's portable, it's cheap, it's
Mhm.
sustainable. I mean, you can teach a 7-year-old how to clean this thing in about a minute and a half. And it takes out all bacteria. It takes basically everything zero point 0.1 micron or bigger out of unclean surface water. So at this point, I'm thinking, man, I want to bring some of these back to Brazil. So in 2014, we go back to Brazil, and I remember fundraising for 80 of these things.
Okay.
And Todd, your business is very interesting to me, just that digital fundraising world,
Mhm.
because I've absolutely, over the last 10 years of the bucket ministry, realized some things that I don't like very much. And one of those may be fundraising.
Oh yeah. Nobody loves it. Nobody loves it.
So, but I learned the key early on in fundraising, and I was trying to raise like $5,000 for these filters, and so I just wore out my friends and family, and they finally gave me money and told me just to be quiet and
Yeah.
go.
Here's your gift. Talk to me never or 5 years from now.
So we go back to the Amazon in 2014. I brought 80 of these things. And again, I thought this was just about the humanitarian aspect of this. So we brought these 80 filters in. We set up in our first village. It was a village maybe of 20, 30 homes. There might have been 50 or 60 people there. We gathered the entire village. I did this presentation. I taught people why they were getting sick from the water. I taught them how this filter works. And then I taught them how to care for it. And I thought I was done at that point. And I mean, I was so proud of myself, Todd. I thought, help them. I now get what this means.
Check.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'm packing up all of our stuff. And this Brazilian man walks up to me. And through our translator, he said, "Can you tell me how you came to our village today?" And I was like, well, I wasn't prepared to answer that question. So I made a joke. I said, well, that boat and that captain, that's how I got here. And he's like, no. Of all the villages, how did you come to our village? And again, I wasn't prepared to answer that, but I said, well, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, and I felt called to bring these gifts to you. And the next thing he said changed the course and really the trajectory of this ministry. And so this man says, again through a translator, "Who is this Jesus?" I was like, oh boy.
I really wasn't prepared for that one. Right.
Yeah, I'm not a preacher. I can't stand on a rock and preach. But so I said, listen, I'm going to tell you what Jesus did in my heart. And I'm going to tell you what I struggled with and how he rescued me and how he's never left me. And so I told him the story of the car crash, and the entire village is listening at this point. And at the end of this, I said, and I had to physically invite Jesus into my heart. It's not something that people could force me to receive. I had to want to receive him to take control of my life. So this Brazilian man goes, wow. How can I have that? So that day that happened changed everything. And the vision that I thought that I was given for this ministry of help them, I thought it was just clean water. But what we found that day, and what I didn't tell the rest of that story, the entire village came to Christ that day as well.
Wow.
So what I didn't say about the rest of the story is that that vision of this thing just being this humanitarian tool, that day we found that we could use this water filter as a key that unlocks a door that builds a relationship that we earn the right to share the gospel. And then for those that come to believe, we earn the right to start to disciple them.
Yeah.
And the filter is merely just the key that starts the relationship. And so that's kind of the humble origins.
Yeah. This is great. I have 1,000 questions. Okay. I'm assuming by now you are way better prepared to talk about water into the living water. And then you have all your segues down of when you talk about this and how you spread the gospel. Like, do you, and at this point, have you developed teams because you're a limited person to where you can be, and this is way past Brazil at this point, am I right?
Yeah, way past Brazil. And if you would have ever told me we would be working anywhere but Brazil, I would say, listen, there's not a chance. But we're now working in 20 countries, and we have hundreds of indigenous partners. We don't work by taking Americans over to do the work while we make trips. It's solely to encourage the indigenous pastors or missionaries and to train them and to equip them and then to get out of the way. So we're working in about 20 different countries, and some of our biggest campaigns are in Kenya, Africa, Honduras, Guatemala, and the Amazon basin. And
so still using water, but you're finding local boots on the ground pastors and you're telling them, hey, two things: you can love on people through giving clean water, which helps their health, and it's a door opener for you, and let me explain you how to do that and whatever, and then they listen to you, and then you encourage and enable them and walk on to the next thing. Did I understand that right?
Yeah, and the key here is knowing how big the opportunity is, Todd. And I never realized this early on, but the World Health Organization cites that 785 million people lack access to clean water.
Mm-hmm.
So that's roughly, well, the US population is about 331 million. Mm-hmm. So we're talking twice the population of the US. Around the world, people don't have access to something we take for granted. So the opportunity out there is so great. You don't have to look far to where people need clean water and they're far from God. Yeah. And clean water, in my opinion, is simply the greatest tool to advance the gospel, because you don't have to convince someone that they need clean water. Mm-hmm. There's no selling of that. So as far as building immediate relational equity with the recipients of our process, there's no time frame of we're taking years to build a relationship, because something so incredible happens when they see that dirty water go through this filter. Mm-hmm. The symbolism between the dirty water and the sin in our lives and the filter and what Jesus did for us on that cross is so great, yeah, that it makes that relationship advance, yeah, so incredibly quickly. And it becomes just simply the greatest tool to use, because besides oxygen, and I can't do a lot about helping people have more oxygen, yeah, but clean water is pretty much up there as far as one of the biggest physical needs.
Yes, the gospel in action. It's amazing. So it's funny. I was going to ask that question, but you've already answered it. I'm going to poke a little bit. I was wondering how much education was a challenge for you guys, meaning there are cultures who drink out of brown rivers for generations. And so I thought, okay, you get a bucket, you pour dirty water and it comes out clean. I thought it'd be like, oh, that's neat, it came out clean, but we've been drinking out of this river forever. Like, is it, but what I'm hearing you say is something must be innate in us to see that clean water is the better water, and you're not having to convince them that they really need that.
Well, that is a lively topic. And this is something I've been studying for the last 10 years is, again, I have no background in this. And in fact, in our entire ministry at the Bucket Ministry, we have a few staff members and we have several full-time volunteers. Of all those people, only 2 of them have ministry background. So our background is extremely business, with business background. Mm-hmm. So we look at things generally a little different than most ministry people might. But I like to study things that I don't understand. And in the beginning, I didn't understand why people wouldn't seek another option. And part of it becomes cultural. And what I now know is that person I'm serving with a water filter in the gospel, those people drink out of that river directly because their parents drank out of that river directly. Their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents. So it becomes cultural. Here's another cultural issue that it still blows me away. I will often ask people that are experiencing major waterborne disease in these places where we work, are you sick? And almost everyone will tell us no, even though they have massive headaches, diarrhea, skin rashes. And the troubling part of that statement is that they say that they're not sick because they think that's normal.
Yeah. They're numb. They're numb to, they have no idea how feeling great would be.
Exactly. And that's why our process using the Sawyer water filter, if we followed the process as we've learned how to do it through a series of failures over the last 10 years.
Right.
We learn and we use it appropriately. We can influence people to have positive reactions, positive health improvements in just days if they follow the process of drinking only the water through the filter, washing their hands only with clean water, washing their food, their pots and pans only with clean water. So if they follow that process, they will be symptom free for waterborne disease very quickly. And if that happens very quickly, we break the cultural barrier that we fight of, well, my parents drank out of that, why wouldn't I?
Uh-huh. Wow.
So that cultural norm is just, it's enormous, and it doesn't make any sense for us, but our parents, grandparents, and great grandparents didn't drink out of a river, right?
Right. Oh,
And
yeah.
so that's just the norm there. And so our process is designed around people having a great health experience fairly quickly. And
Wow.
because if that takes months to change, they're going to get lazy, and they're just going to
They won't
keep
believe.
drinking out
They
of the
won't
river.
believe it. Yeah, they won't invest into it. But feeling that good that quick, they're now attentive.
Exactly.
How that's amazing. Okay, I'm going to be in the weeds for a second, but just how my brain works.
Go ahead.
I know the filters must be easy to put into a suitcase and fly across the world, but buckets. So buckets are harder. I'm assuming you plan for there to be buckets on location. And then I started wondering about, is that true? And two, color of buckets. I've worked around the world, and colors matter. And you may come to a village with blue buckets, and they're like, oh, we wouldn't touch a blue bucket to save our lives, right? Have you learned all the nuances of buckets, colors, sizes, material, like all the give me bucket talk for a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. The filters are made by Sawyer Products right outside Tampa, Florida, and we buy pallets of them, ship them into Rockwall, and then we transport them around the world. The old way of doing it used to be in suitcases, but honestly, that is not efficient and also not 100% righteous.
Okay.
So now we freight filters in either ocean freight or air cargo and pallet configurations, just because we're doing a lot more work now.
Sure.
But the buckets, on the other hand, it makes no sense bringing a bucket from the United States unless the bucket is free and the freight is free. So
Okay.
99% of the time, all the buckets are sourced in country. All the Bibles we use are sourced in country. Anything we can get is sourced in country. But there's a great big difference between buckets here that you go buy at Home Depot for $3.50, $4, and a bucket you buy in an overseas country. And there are some countries where the buckets are so poor you can't even look at them, where they break.
Right.
And there's other countries where they're a lot better. So being a bucket sourcing detective is a big part of our job, because when we give these away, and we give them away just like the gospel is a free gift. So when we give these away, we want to make sure that we're giving something away that's going to last 20 years, because that's how long the filter will last if it's cared for properly.
Wow.
So we look for the thickest walled buckets we can find, but it's not easy. And your point about color makes me laugh, because it's inevitable that we get different colored buckets. And in many countries, especially if they have stoves inside their house, there's a lot of ash generated. So we give them lids on the buckets. And in my man mind, it should make no difference what color the bucket is or what color the lid is.
Right.
But in some countries, and this is a point of frustration, but again, it's a first world point of frustration, apparently. But we will hand out a blue bucket to somebody, but we only have a red lid. And many ladies in the homes don't go for that, and they take the bucket.
They won't want it because it's
The
going
bucket
to
and the
clash
lid
with
are
their,
not the same color.
while there's sand on the floor and whatever, first world kitchen, but yet the color scheme's wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
No,
that is very true. And all those little subtle nuances are the things, like I indicated earlier, that we've learned from a series of failures. And there's very few people that use water filtration as a tool to advance the gospel. There's an awful lot of people that use water filtration in disaster relief, things like that.
Yeah.
So much of this process, we have looked at best practices of other people and had to learn by failure. And frankly, that's how I learned the best. But yeah,
we all do. It's the painful way to do it, but it works because it memorizes it. I was what happened the other day in my family? Something. Oh, I know what it was. My son was moving from college at home, and he had a chest of drawers in the back of his truck, and he turned it the wrong way, and the drawer opened, and he lost checks out on the highway. And he called me and he asked me about it. And I remember telling my friend, I said, I bet you the next time he puts chest of drawers in his truck, they'll be facing the right way. Like, right, he learned. It's a tough lesson, but man, he'll never put in furniture in the back of a truck wrong ever again. Never will. So yeah, sometimes we just got to learn the tough way. Okay, so another question I had, I've been to the and I know say it right all the time, the Kibera slums in Kenya.
You've been there
in Nairobi. Yeah, it was life-changing. It was just like you. I've been to Brazil too, but I've not been in the depths of the Amazon like you, but I've been a couple times. But my Kibera slums was my moment where I just saw the world different. The rest of my life has changed because of that slum. And when we're talking here, I've heard you and me talk about rivers and water, but there's a difference between rural and river and dirty lake, and literally being in the middle of Nairobi with shacks, and you're walking in sewage or jumping over sewage as you walk between houses. Where does the water come from to even clean? So sometimes people need water. It's not that they even have dirty water to drink, they have hardly any water to drink. So how do you navigate the difference between city needs for water and country needs for water?
Man, that's a great question. And I actually think about this and pray over this an awful lot. We've always worked in the remote bush areas, the places where you might have to take 2 boats and an airplane to get someplace. And in 2017, I was making our first trip to Kenya, and we were coming back into Nairobi from Nandi County. And our driver brought us past the bypass on the way to the airport. And I saw this sea of rusty metal, little tiny homes. And I was overwhelmed by this because as far as I could see, there was these little rusty metal homes. And I said, what is that? And our driver, Ronald, who's now our country director in Kenya, said to me, that's Kibera. And he said it so coldly, I knew I shouldn't ask anymore. So Kibera is one of the largest urban slums on the planet, maybe number 2 in size in Africa. And there's 408,000 people that live within 3 square miles. There's 95,228 homes within Kibera with an average of 3.9 people per home. How do we know that? We counted them all, which is crazy to say out loud. So Kibera is nestled in the middle of Nairobi, Kenya, as you have said, Todd. And Nairobi's like 6 or 7 million people. So here you have 408,000 people living in the middle of a major modern city. I mean, for the love of Pete, there's a golf course on one side of the slum.
I've seen that picture, and it makes you lay in bed at night and stare at the ceiling, how that could be true.
Yeah, so there's guys golfing, driving a more expensive golf cart than a majority of the people in Kibera could ever even think about.
Mhm.
So here's 408,000 people created in God's image that are living in abject poverty. And abject poverty is described as living on $2 a day per month. And here the people of Kibera live on about $26 per family per month. So they're living sub abject poverty. And so their water source is much different, as you've illustrated, than bush communities, remote bush communities. In Kibera, there's a river, but it is a river of sewage. And while people use that water, most don't use it for drinking. So Kibera is also essentially avoided. It's invisible to most of the people, most of the government there in Kenya. And what I mean by that is there's very few social services. There's no refuse pickup. Most of the electricity that's there is scabbed from point to point. There's people that live in these little 8x8 or 10x10 rusty metal tin shacks, all connected together with dirt floors. They don't have restrooms. There's no food preparation area, and there's no running water to their homes. And honestly, all the running water that's there has been scabbed on to other city sources, and it's all cracked and it's gnarly and they're all leaking. So a lot of times these water lines, if it's dry and it's not raining, they could deliver semi-clean water. But when it's raining, instead of that water shooting out of the pipe, you have this little venturi action and water is sucked into the pipe.
Wow.
And the water gets submerged. So it's sucking in and contaminating the whole piping system. And there's pipes strewn all over the ground. So the people that live in Kibera, that call Kibera home, and most of these people are the sweetest people, the most lovely people I've ever met in my life. Most of these people have to buy their water, and they spend a big percentage of their income buying water that's contaminated. So they either buy it from water trucks that are contaminated, or if they buy it from somebody who has a tap. In less than 0.1% of people in Kibera have a tap in their home. Again, how do we know? We counted them. So their only source of water is purchasing water that's unclean. So
They still can use you guys easy, even if they're getting clean water, it still needs to be run through your bucket.
Oh yeah, and the difference is the water in Kibera. If you look at it, it doesn't look like muddy river water. It doesn't look clean, but it's semi-clear looking. So the thing that the filter removes best are the things that we often can't see: bacteria, protozoans, other parasites. And so the filter works great there, and we have enough work there that the data is coming back showing that we're seeing massive reductions in waterborne disease. Wow. So the tool from the humanitarian side is great, and the tool as far as the spiritual aspect is a little unbelievable. And this is something that, as an organization, I don't think we could have predicted. But we have 180 missionaries and pastors that are on our team now in Kibera, that 5 days a week, all they do is distribute filters and do follow-up visitations on the homes that have had filters.
Wow.
And so on average, we're doing 22 to 2,500 follow-up visitations a week. And in that period of time, when we do a follow-up, we're checking to make sure the filter's working. But after that, we quickly transitioned into a spiritual assessment, finding out who's a believer, who's not. And we will go ahead and share the gospel. And for those that are believers, we will start patterns of discipleship. We'll teach some Bible study lessons to them. And in this process, we are seeing anywhere from 225 to 300 people coming to faith each week.
Wow. Wow.
Todd, this is each week. And, I look for examples of this, and this is not, and this is the important thing to understand, this is not a Billy Graham crusade where there's 10,000 people in a stadium
Right.
and 1,000 people give their life to Christ, where not many of those stuck. Even Billy Graham said maybe 5% of those were legitimate. And so these are salvations that we're experiencing, that we're witnessing, that are in people's home. And our teams go in teams of 2. They share the gospel, they record the salvations, and then we do the follow-ups after if they're believers, and then turn those people over to local churches. So these aren't like stadium events where we're witnessing this many salvations. These are in-home visits where we're witnessing this amount of salvation. And the important part with that, I think, also is the bucket is what gets us in the door. The filter gets us in the door, because when we give this thing away, it comes with 2 covenants. So if I would issue one of these to you right now, Todd, I would tell you, number 1, Todd, to get this, you have to promise to clean it. Number 2, you have to promise to let us check on you 3 times in the first couple months to make sure you're using it properly. So it gets us in the door. And so none of these gospel conversations would have happened without the filter being in each and every one of those homes in Kibera.
Wow. I love it. Okay, I'm going to ask a weeds question again, just because I've got to. But and I don't know if this applies any more than in the slums, but for those people listening, it's hard to describe those slums unless you've been there. Like, don't think houses and roads. Think tin shacks, alleys, dirt floors with a trench dug out that has literally sewer running through it, and kids running everywhere. Like you said, wires that are homemade that is stealing electricity from somewhere else. Like, it's the slums, and there is a lot of bad activity that goes on, especially after dark, like robbing, raping, drugs. There's just a lot of bad things. And I wondered if these buckets are prized possessions, and by owning it, does it cause jealousy, or do people steal them, or do people destroy them because they don't want you to have them? Like, have you noticed any social effects by giving these out?
Well, number 1, you're right. It's a bad, scary place. And to put it in perspective, most women in the slum, and there's only 78 latrines to serve 408,000 people. So you do the math on how that works. So to put it in perspective, most women at night will not go out to go to the bathroom. And that's all I'm going to say about that. It's a bad place. So, the smells, all of it just combine to really stick to your heart, and it's hard to shake it. So the filters have done something that most other organizations that have attempted or claimed to have worked in Kibera in the past haven't. The filters have been almost a universal key, and there is 47 tribes represented within Kibera. And as you can imagine, not all those tribes get along. So what we have witnessed is the filter has almost been a unifying agent for tribes, even for churches of different denominations, where the filter has allowed us to gather groups of people together that would never, ever have gotten together, and allowed us to preach on unity. And at that same time, in other places where we work remotely, we have seen where if we don't cover the entire village with filters, it causes some jealousy or some animosity, like you have alluded to. But in Kibera, I think that probably could have been the case, except for we are working so fast right now that I think we're covering enough ground. And if someone's neighbor doesn't have a filter yet, literally the next week they will get their filter.
Wow.
And so we are on pace to distribute 95,228 filters in a 3-year time span.
Ooh,
And
wow, that's aggressive.
it is aggressive, but again, like I said, our background is business, and I will tell you one thing: if you get things done quicker, they cost less. Now, there's still going to be the lasting effect of trying to build up the churches that are already there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to have a longer presence in Kibera. But as far as the distribution and follow-ups of the filters, we're working at a pace right now that if somebody doesn't have a filter right now, if they just wait a couple weeks, they're going to get their filter. So that has not been a problem to us, but it could be because the pace of work that we're on right now.
Wow. Okay, so as we wrap up this conversation, give the sales pitch. I mean, somebody's listening to this, like, okay, I'm so interested. What is the cost of one? Because I'm assuming you're buying in bulk and you're getting the best price you can from this filter company, right? And you just said you're becoming a worldwide bucket expert. So what is it, as if somebody wants to help, what is a bucket cost? What do you want out of people? What do you want them to become monthly partners, one-time donors? Do they support a village? Do they support a bucket? How does this work?
Yeah, so great question. And let me ask you this, Todd. How much could you take your family to Applebee's for right now?
Oh, a whole family nowadays? Oh, it's less than $100, $80 at least.
$80 to go to Applebee's.
Yeah.
Okay. So in most countries where we work right now, we can provide the bucket, the filter, antiparasitic medicines for the entire family, a Bible, and the 3 follow-up visitations for $50.
Wow.
So for less than you can,
one-time eat.
Yeah, for less than you can go to Applebee's once, and I use Applebee's just because everybody knows Applebee's.
Yeah.
For less than you can bring your family to Applebee's, you can provide somebody with clean, safe drinking water for at least 20 years and know that they're hearing the gospel of Jesus Christ. And if they come to faith, that they will be started in discipleship lessons. So the amazing thing about what we do is we're a very simple ministry. We only do clean water and Jesus. That's it. We don't build houses. We don't hand out bags of food. Those are all wonderful things that other people do, but we stay in our lane. And because we stay in our lane, I think we're pretty efficient and pretty good at it. Plus, with a business background, we mind our P's and Q's pretty closely. Mm-hmm. So for $50, you can change somebody's life at such a wholesale level that I mean, you can just give somebody a different outcome. Here's a crazy thing. Do you realize that most of the people we serve, they don't name their children for the first 2 years of the child's existence? Why did they do that? Because so many children die from waterborne disease.
Wow.
So for something so simple as a filter, a bucket, and these follow-up visitations will change somebody's entire existence. So we would love to have people involved in a variety of different ways, whatever fits them best. And we work off a very simple system of pray, give, go, tell. And our first place where we start with anything we do is in prayer. So would you commit to pray for the ministry? Would you commit to pray for more resources, to buy more filters for the ministry? Would you commit to pray for the team? And if we just had more prayer partners coming in through our website, I mean, that would be like the greatest thing in the world for me. The second part, give. Well, obviously this work gets done because God's people fund it. And I wish we lived in a world where I got free water filters and free buckets, but right. It's not the case. And so we need the resources. So for $50, you can provide a family clean, safe drinking water. Now, what we didn't talk about just real quickly is every single filter that we distribute comes with a barcode on the filter. At the point of distribution, we scan the barcode, we collect data, so we know where every filter is with the GPS pinpoint, and we can share that with our donors.
Oh, wow.
So as far as the $50 go, if you want to know exactly where your filter goes that you sponsor a family, we can show you exactly where. And every time we go visit them again, you'll get an update. And so that's pray, that's give, go. We make several trips throughout the year, and we would love to take people out to these mission fields. But people need to know it's not to swing a hammer or to hand out a bag of rice. It's to be encouragers for the local team and to pour into the local team because our work is not predicated on a bunch of Americans coming to do the work. So we work exclusively through Indigenous partners. And then last part of it is what we're doing today, storytelling.
Yeah.
You know, would you commit to inviting some friends over and letting us come over and tell you and your friends about the ministry, do a brief share the story night or something at your home? Would you share a social media post? I mean, would you tell your friends about this podcast? Whatever it's going to be, would you help us advance the mission just by sharing the story?
I love it.
And
Your model. Go ahead.
And all these things can be found on thebucketministry.org.
Yeah. Your website is wonderful. You do a great job of storytelling, like you're talking about. But it's trust me, I'm going to give you a really big compliment. You don't know how big this is because I've done what I do for a living for almost 25 years.
Oh my goodness.
So I've helped faith-based nonprofits and or churches for 2.5 decades. I can't go to a website without critiquing it. It's all I do. Like I just look at people and say, oh, they should move that call to action here, their website. If they would just change that color, if they would just do that. Like I go to everybody's website and I beat it up. And my clients love that. And if you're not my client, you don't. I went to your website and I literally was just like, I slow clapped you. I was like, this is one. I don't know who did it. I don't know who you paid. I don't know anything. So I may be, you know, it may be a vendor you use or whatever, but I'm just telling you, you guys not only are doing amazing things, you do them amazingly well. And it's very rare because I see people do great things and they're horrible storytellers, or their website's just not mature, their social media is not mature. And the Lord's blessing you because you're doing things so well that I literally, I mean, I might have had one or two little things, but they were nothing comparatively what I normally do. And I was just so impressed with what you've got going on as an organization that this is why I literally stopped what I was doing and made a video about you guys.
That is probably the most amazing compliment ever. So thank you. And I will tell you, Todd, we just have great friends, and this ministry walk is not been the easiest thing in the world. But the good news is, whenever we pray over it, the Lord sends us new friends that will help us through these things. And we know storytelling is so incredibly important. And without the stories, I don't think it's as easy for people to engage. And I'm glad you thought that about the website. That's amazing to hear.
I'm so happy. I have 1,000 more questions, but we've got to wrap this thing up. Do you mind if I end us in a prayer? Do you have anything other? Repeat your website one more time.
It's thebucketministry.org.
Okay, I want people to go there and learn. And you know, I was just sitting here thinking, $50 a month. That's 12 families you're helping. 12. It's not 12 people. 12 families. And then when Christ comes into a village or a neighborhood, that ripples. And so your $50 is compounded in ways in kingdom work that we'll never be able to measure this side of heaven.
Amen.
And man, just I pray that the ripple effects for this will go far. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna pray for us.
Yes, please.
Heavenly Father, God, you are awesome. We are grateful for your mercies and to know that you and only you are in control of all things. Lord, I thank you for Chris, how you have uniquely made him and are shaping him into the man and the leader he is today. Thank you for working on his heart and making it pliable that he could do your will that you shoved on him midlife. And Lord, thank you for making him open to that idea and pulling him into the jungles of South America to get his attention, Lord. We thank you for the grace you show him, and we thank you for making him committed to helping others with their physical and their spiritual needs. Lord, I ask a continued blessing on Chris and the Bucket Ministry. We ask you to grow their reach, and while growing the name and the knowledge of Jesus all around the globe. Show yourself mightily as you use Chris and his team to expose the truths and tribes and the cultures where they might not have been welcomed before. Lord, we love you, and we thank you for first loving us. And it's in your precious son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Brother, thank you for taking the time. Who knows,
Thank
we may have a part 2, because I'll lay in bed tonight and think of about a million other things I want to ask you, but I love what you guys are doing.
Well, thank you so much, Todd. I'm grateful for you allowing us to tell the story